My name is Rebecca Hayes, and I'm 31 years old. For the past 8 years, I've been a gate guard at Fort Carson Army Base in Colorado. While most people believe my job is just sitting in a booth checking IDs, there's a lot more responsibility involved in protecting a military installation. On the morning of my younger sister Emma's wedding, I looked at my reflection and wondered if my family would finally stop seeing me as their biggest disappointment. Little did I know that by the end of the day, their entire perception of my life would be completely shattered. Before I tell you what happened when Emma decided to embarrass me in front of 300 guests, please leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Also, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe because what her military groom did next will absolutely astound you. Growing up in our affluent Colorado Springs neighborhood, I always felt like an outsider trying to meet the Hayes family's expectations. My dad was a successful financial advisor, managing portfolios for wealthy clients, while my mom was a highly sought-after real estate agent. They were a powerful couple who attended charity galas and country club events, always impeccably dressed and well-connected. Emma, 4 years my junior, had always been their pride and joy. She excelled at everything from academics and sports to social situations. She graduated from the University of Colorado with honors in international business and quickly secured a desirable position at a multinational consulting firm in Denver. Her career trajectory seemed effortless, with each success celebrated by our parents on social media and at family dinners. My path was different from the start. I struggled with traditional academics, finding classroom learning uninspiring and too restrictive. While Emma collected awards and praise, I preferred hands-on work and found fulfillment in practical problem-solving. When I graduated from high school with mediocre grades, the disappointment in my parents' eyes was undeniable. College lasted only 1 semester. The University of Northern Colorado felt like an expensive way to continue being average at subjects that didn't interest me. When I announced my decision to drop out and pursue a career in security, my family's reaction was swift and harsh. My dad called it throwing my life away, and my mom worried about what she would tell her friends. My choice to work at Fort Carson wasn't a random decision. I had always been drawn to structure, discipline, and the sense of purpose that comes with protecting something important. The application process was rigorous, including extensive background checks, psychological evaluations, and specialized training. Once I was accepted, I knew I had found my calling. The work itself was far more complex than my family understood or cared to learn about. As a civilian security specialist, I was responsible for monitoring all vehicle and pedestrian traffic entering and exiting the base. This involved operating sophisticated scanning equipment, coordinating with various law enforcement agencies, and meticulously logging all security incidents. I worked closely with military police, intelligence officers, and federal agents, often handling situations that required quick thinking and absolute discretion. But trying to explain this to my family during our monthly dinners was pointless. The conversation always followed the same pattern. My dad would ask about Emma's latest business trip or promotion, while my mom would share updates about Emma's social life and dating prospects. When they finally remembered to ask about my job, their eyes would glaze over as I tried to explain the importance of base security. "That's nice, Rebecca," my mom would say with a hint of disinterest. "Emma, tell us about that client presentation you mentioned." The subtle put-downs were constant. At family gatherings, when relatives asked what I did for a living, I would watch my mom's face tighten with embarrassment. She would quickly redirect the conversation to Emma's accomplishments or make vague comments about me, still finding my direction. Meanwhile, Emma's career milestones were announced like royal decrees, complete with detailed explanations of her responsibilities and future prospects. I tried not to let their disapproval affect me, but family dynamics have a way of influencing your self-perception. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a reliable used truck, and had built a small savings account through careful budgeting. By any reasonable standard, I was a responsible, independent adult with a stable career and a clear sense of purpose. But in my family's story, I was still the underachiever who settled for less. When Emma announced her engagement to Captain Michael Rodriguez in February, I felt a genuine sense of happiness for her. Despite our complicated relationship, She was still my sister, and I wanted her to find love and fulfillment. Michael seemed like a good match, a decorated Army officer with an impressive service record and a clear career path. What surprised me was Emma's invitation to be her maid of honor. We had never been particularly close. Our relationship was more polite distance than sisterly intimacy. But her phone call that evening had an unusual warmth. "Rebecca, I know we haven't always been as close as sisters should be," she said softly. "But you're my only sister, and I can't imagine getting married without you by my side." The invitation felt like an opportunity to rebuild our relationship on a stronger foundation. Maybe the wedding would be a turning point, a chance for Emma to see me as more than just the family disappointment. Perhaps finally being included in something so central to her life would close the emotional gap that had grown between us over the years. My optimism lasted until the first dress appointment. Emma had chosen an exclusive bridal boutique in Denver's Cherry Creek, the kind of place where appointments were booked months in advance and dresses cost more than most people's monthly salary. The other bridesmaids were her college sorority sisters and work colleagues, sophisticated women with advanced degrees and corporate jobs who casually discussed their vacation homes and European business trips. As I stood on the fitting platform in the elegant navy blue gown Emma had chosen, I overheard her conversation with my mom. "I just hope she doesn't look too out of place in the photos," Emma whispered, critically studying me. "Look at her posture, Mom. She stands like she's still at that security gate." My mom's response felt like a dagger in my chest. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll make sure she gets proper coaching before the wedding, maybe some lessons on how to carry herself more elegantly. We can't have her looking like military personnel in your wedding photos." Standing in that beautiful dress, surrounded by women who saw me as a project to be fixed rather than a person to be valued, I felt the familiar sting of my family's disappointment. My posture wasn't a sign of poor breeding or lack of sophistication. It was the result of years spent maintaining professional alertness and physical readiness. But to them, it was just another sign of my inability to fit into their world. The engagement party at the country club was even worse. Emma and Michael moved through the crowd like celebrities, basking in the attention of family, friends, and business associates. I was left to talk with distant relatives and acquaintances, people who knew just enough about me to ask polite questions but not enough for a meaningful conversation. When Michael's military colleagues showed up, I thought I might finally find some common ground. Instead, I found myself repeatedly explaining that I worked in civilian security support, watching their interest disappear as they realized I wasn't military personnel or a federal agent. One conversation was particularly painful. "What branch of service were you in?" a major's wife asked me politely. "Actually, I'm a civilian," I replied. "I work installation security at Fort Carson." Her smile remained, but her eyes grew noticeably colder. "Oh, well, security work is certainly important." The conversation immediately ended, and they quickly excused themselves to talk to other military families about Michael's upcoming deployment. I spent the rest of the evening making small talk with people who clearly saw me as Emma's less successful sister, a family member who deserved polite acknowledgement but not genuine engagement. Despite these warning signs, I threw myself into wedding planning with hope. I took on extra shifts at the base to afford the expensive maid of honor responsibilities, from the designer shoes Emma chose to my contribution to her bachelorette weekend in Aspen. I even used my vacation time to help with preparations, driving to vendor appointments and coordinating details that Emma was too busy to handle. The rehearsal dinner at the Broadmoor Hotel was my first real glimpse into Michael's world. His family represented generations of military service, with his father being a retired colonel and his mother coming from a long line of officers' wives. These were people who understood military life and respected the discipline and sacrifice that came with serving your country. I approached the evening with cautious optimism, thinking that maybe Michael's family would appreciate my connection to military life, even as a civilian employee. Instead, I once again found myself explaining my support role and watching as their interest faded, realizing I wasn't someone they considered significant in their military social hierarchy. The morning of Emma's wedding was bright and clear. The ceremony was at the Garden of the Gods Club, an exclusive venue with breathtaking views of the red rock formations. Everything about the day was picture perfect, from the imported orchids to the live string ensemble. I arrived at the bridal suite early, hoping to help with final preparations and maybe find a quiet moment to connect with Emma. Instead, I walked into what felt like a professional photo shoot. Emma sat like a queen, surrounded by her bridesmaids, who were all getting professional hair and makeup done by a team of artists flown in from Los Angeles. "Rebecca, thank goodness you're here," Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to discuss your hair. The stylist says your cut is going to be really challenging for the photos." I touched my practical, shoulder-length hair. It was clean, healthy, and professional, but apparently not sophisticated enough for Emma's vision. The stylist, a thin man with severe black-rimmed glasses, sighed dramatically as he approached me. "We'll do what we can," he murmured to Emma as if I weren't there. "But this length and texture aren't giving us much to work with." Very utilitarian. As he worked on transforming my hair, I listened to the easy conversation around the room. The other bridesmaids discussed their careers at investment firms and marketing agencies, their graduate school plans, and their boyfriends who were doctors and lawyers. They spoke a language of ambition and achievement that I understood intellectually but was not permitted to participate in socially. "Rebecca," Emma called from across the room, as her makeup artist applied what looked like pounds of foundation. "You're being awfully quiet. Are you nervous about being in front of all these important people today?" The question was posed as concern, but I heard the underlying message. She was reminding everyone that I didn't belong in this world of important people and significant achievements. The other bridesmaids glanced at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to pity, and my face grew hot. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice steady. "Just taking everything in." One of the bridesmaids, a perfectly groomed brunette named Jessica, who worked in corporate communications, turned to me with a forced smile. "Emma mentioned you work at the Army base. That must be so different from what we're used to. Do you find it fulfilling?" Before I could answer, Emma laughed. "Rebecca has always preferred simple work environments. She likes jobs where the expectations are clear and she doesn't have to navigate complex social dynamics." "Right, Rebecca." The room fell silent. Even the photographer lowered her camera, sensing the tension. "Actually, I began." But Emma was already moving on, turning her attention back to her reflection and launching into a detailed discussion about the ceremony timeline with her wedding planner. The moment passed, but I remained frozen in my chair, Emma's words echoing in my head like a final judgment. The wedding ceremony was flawless. Emma looked radiant in her custom gown, walking down the aisle to Michael, who stood at the altar with the composure of a man accustomed to ceremony. I stood with the other bridesmaids, holding my bouquet and trying to focus on the beauty of the moment. Michael looked impressive in his dress blue uniform, his chest decorated with ribbons and medals that spoke of years of distinguished service. The reception was everything Emma had envisioned. The ballroom was transformed into a sophisticated wonderland with thousands of white flowers and crystal chandeliers. The guest list included Colorado Springs social and business elite, mixed with military personnel whose uniforms added an air of honor. I was seated at table 8, near the back of the room with distant relatives and acquaintances. It was the kind of table where conversations revolved around safe topics like the weather and compliments about the venue. From my seat, I could see the head table where Emma and Michael sat with their families. Emma glowed with happiness, while my parents beamed with pride at their daughter's perfect day and her advantageous marriage to a rising military officer. I tried to focus on the positive aspects of the evening. The food was excellent, the music was elegant, and despite everything, I felt genuine joy watching Emma so radiant. But as the evening went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was an observer, watching a party I wasn't truly invited to. During the cocktail hour, I had tried to talk to Michael's military colleagues, thinking we might connect over our shared link to the base. Instead, I found myself repeatedly explaining my civilian support role, watching as their polite interest vanished. One conversation with a lieutenant colonel and his wife was particularly deflating. "Are you military as well?" the wife asked. I'm a civilian, I replied. I work installation security at Fort Carson. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, as people's faces do when they realize they've mistaken someone for being more important than they are. Oh, well, security is certainly crucial work. The conversation died, and they quickly found excuses to join other groups. As dinner ended and the dancing began, I found myself increasingly isolated at my table. The other bridesmaids were swept onto the dance floor by groomsmen, while I sat nursing a glass of wine, watching the fairy tale unfold like a movie I wasn't a part of. That's when Emma decided it was time for her maid of honor speech. The moment Emma tapped her champagne flute, the entire ballroom fell silent. The band stopped playing, and all eyes turned to her at the head table, luminous in her wedding gown. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice clear. "This has been the most magical day of my life, and having all of you here to witness Michael and me beginning our journey means more than I can express." The crowd murmured in approval, and despite the evening's tensions, I found myself genuinely smiling. Whatever our complicated history, this was Emma's moment, and she deserved to bask in the love surrounding her. She continued with gracious thanks to her new in-laws, Michael's military service, and the vendors. Then she turned to personal acknowledgments, starting with our parents. "I have to thank my incredible parents," she said, gesturing to them. "They've supported every dream I've ever had, believed in my potential, and taught me that with hard work, there are no limits." My mom teared up, and my dad stood briefly to acknowledge the applause. "And I want to thank my beautiful bridesmaids," Emma continued, "who have been such important parts of my journey." She went through each one individually, sharing anecdotes and expressing specific gratitude. Then she reached me. "And my maid of honor, my sister Rebecca," she said, and I felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this would be the moment she acknowledged our relationship with genuine warmth. Instead, what she said made me feel like I had been physically hit. "Well, she's just a gate guard. Who would really want someone like that?" The words dropped into the room like a sonic boom. For a heartbeat, there was complete silence as 300 guests processed what they had heard. Then, laughter began to ripple through the crowd. Not nervous chuckles but genuine hearty laughter. I sat paralyzed, my face burning with humiliation as the laughter grew louder. But Emma wasn't finished. "I mean, seriously, what kind of career is that?" she continued, emboldened by the crowd's response. "Sitting in a little booth all day, checking IDs and raising gate arms. It's not exactly brain surgery, is it?" The laughter that followed was even louder and more cruel. This wasn't teasing. This was a deliberate, calculated public shaming. Then my mom decided to join in. Rising from her seat with the authority of someone used to commanding attention, she raised her own champagne glass. "She's the shame of this family," my mom announced, her words crisp and clear. "Always has been, probably always will be." The laughter that followed was different. Louder, but also more uncomfortable. Some guests shifted in their seats, sensing this had crossed a line. But no one spoke up. I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Emma wasn't done twisting the knife. "Michael is so accomplished, so distinguished," she continued, gesturing to her new husband. "Can you imagine if he had ended up with someone like Rebecca? What would people think of a decorated army captain married to a gate guard?" The cruelty was breathtaking. This wasn't just about my job. It was about my fundamental value as a person. I looked desperately at my dad, hoping for some intervention, but he remained seated, his face neutral. As the laughter began to die down, Emma delivered one final blow. "I love my sister. I really do," she said with a saccharine sweetness that made the words even more painful. "But let's be honest about reality. Some people are destined for greatness, and others," she shrugged dramatically, "others are meant to check IDs at army base gates." The silence that followed was profound. I could hear my own heartbeat as I sat there, completely destroyed in front of everyone. Then, something completely unexpected happened. Michael stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, and every head in the room turned toward him. He rose to his full height, his uniform immaculate, his face set in an expression I couldn't read. He stood there for a few seconds, surveying the crowd with a commanding presence. Then, slowly and with clear intention, he turned toward my table and executed a formal military bow. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "she's my commanding officer." The silence was so complete, it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Michael continued, his voice steady and authoritative. "Rebecca Hayes is Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Hayes, my direct superior at Fort Carson. She has been conducting a highly classified security assessment for the past 3 years, operating under deep cover to evaluate our installation's vulnerability." I watched in stunned disbelief as every face in the room turned toward me. Emma's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. "The position she has maintained as a gate guard has been essential to her mission," Michael continued with military precision. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes has been systematically evaluating every aspect of our base security. I have been providing her with weekly classified reports for the past 2 years." My mom's face had gone completely white. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Michael wasn't finished. "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes's work has been instrumental in identifying and correcting 17 major security vulnerabilities that could have compromised national security and endangered the lives of military personnel. Her dedication exemplifies the highest standards of military service." The transformation in the room was immediate. Military personnel began straightening in their seats, many rising to their feet out of respect. Cruel laughter was replaced by hushed discussions. "Furthermore," Michael said, "Lieutenant Colonel Hayes holds a master's degree in security studies from the War College, advanced certifications in counterintelligence, and has received commendations from the Department of Defense. She is one of the most highly qualified and respected officers in her field." I sat there, feeling like I was watching this scene from outside my own body. The woman who had been publicly humiliated was now the central figure in a new narrative. "The mission has required absolute operational security," I said, finally finding my voice and rising from my seat with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. "My family was not informed of my actual role or rank for security reasons that I'm sure you can all understand." My voice was steady and professional, a stark contrast to the broken woman who had been sitting there moments before. Michael executed a crisp military salute. "Thank you for your service and sacrifice, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes," he said with formal respect. One by one, other military personnel in the room stood and saluted as well. The wedding reception had transformed into a military ceremony of respect and recognition. The aftermath of Michael's revelation was swift and devastating. Emma remained slumped in her chair, staring at me with an expression of complete horror. She had not only destroyed her own wedding reception but had also publicly humiliated a superior military officer in front of her new husband's colleagues and superiors. My mom desperately tried to backtrack. "Rebecca, sweetheart, we had absolutely no idea," she stammered, her voice shaking with panic. "If we had known about your real position and rank." But the damage was done. The words couldn't be taken back, and the deliberate cruelty couldn't be excused by claims of ignorance. My dad finally stood up, his face grim with the realization that his family had just committed a social and professional catastrophe. As a financial advisor who worked with many military families and defense contractors, the ramifications of this public humiliation would be significant.